If you've been paying attention to the podcast, you know that I've been doing a bunch of solo episodes lately, and I wanted to mix it up a little bit. It's high time I have some more interviews. So I reached out to somebody who's kind of a big deal. Her name is Liz Earnshaw. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is a certified Gottman therapist, and she is at Liz Listens on Instagram. And honestly, she's got like 200,000 followers. She's a big deal. People love her. She talks about amazing, wonderful things. You should give her a follow. And if you enjoy this episode with her, you should shoot her a quick message and say, "Hey, Liz, really enjoyed that episode you did with Nate on growth marriage." I'm sure she would appreciate that. Today, we are going to talk about differentiation. If you don't know what that is, stay tuned. It's really important if you want to have a really amazing marriage. And we're going to talk about enmeshment, which is also something really important that you need to understand if you're going to have a great marriage and you don't want to feel like you lose your identity. You don't want to feel like you are 100% affected by your partner's moods, by their desires, by their emotions. So great episode today. Going to teach you a lot about how to be independent while being together. And Liz did a great job at breaking down some really complex ideas. Hope you enjoy. Liz, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Nate. I'm excited to talk to you.
It's always a pleasure to get a fellow relationship-obsessed human on the show to talk about all manner of things. And I'm particularly excited today. It's weird how it's probably not weird how I came across you. Most people probably find you through your Instagram profile because it's freaking popular. But I was just like trolling through Instagram looking for people who were doing it right and people who were talking about relationships in a really powerful way. And your Instagram profile, Liz Listens, popped up and I was like, oh my gosh, she knows what she's talking about. And you're really good at blending in a lot of like Gottman based stuff, a lot of like Sue Johnson's EFT stuff I find a lot in there. And then I find a lot of recently, actually this morning, I jumped on your account and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a topic that is something that has been like totally burning a bee in my bonnet. That's not the right term, but we're just going to go with it.
I think that it works though.
Yeah. You get what I'm talking about. So I want to talk about this idea of differentiation. It's a complicated word, and I kind of want to distill it for everybody and talk about why it's important within relationships. So can you tell me a little bit about, from like your clinical perspective, what does differentiation mean and why is it important for couples to be differentiated?
Yeah, so differentiation is this ability to be in a relationship and still recognize where you end and the other person begins, while also still having some interdependence with them and wanting to connect with them and building intimacy. The opposite of differentiation is to land on either side of the spectrum, right? Which is either to just fully cut off from people, which I think a lot of times people get that confused for differentiation. It might be necessary to fully cut off, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're differentiated, right? Because sometimes we cut off when we haven't really been able to figure out where do I end and they begin, and their presence in our lives is just like so incredibly overwhelming to the self that we just kind of say, forget you, I'm moving across the country and never seeing you again.
Yeah.
And the other opposite to differentiation is enmeshment. So that is a lot of times people get confused and think that means like close community connectedness. And that's not what it means at all. Enmeshment is when you have a really difficult time figuring out like, who are you in relation to this other person? And often the way that you feel, the decisions you make, the way that you behave is highly susceptible to what the other person wants you to feel or is feeling themselves, thinking themselves, or how they would like you to behave.
So we've got the two polarizations. You've got enmeshment on one side and you've got kind of like a detachment on the other side. What does middle ground kind of look like a well-differentiated couple?
Yeah, so a well-differentiated couple would be in that middle ground, and they have the capacity to recognize that there are three parts to the relationship, right? There is me who comes into this relationship, and I think a lot of times we think, when we get married or when we partner up, we fuse. We actually don't fuse. There's still a me. I don't disappear. There's still a you. You don't disappear. But we create something new in the in-between. And a lot of times when I'm working with couples, I tell them, I'm not on your side. I'm not on your side. I'm on the relationship side. And I actually point to in between them, because there's this third being that exists between them, which is the relationship. And so healthy relationships, they kind of are able to dance between all three of those parts.
It sounds like it's a bit of a skill that you have to master. Does this come naturally to some people, or?
I think that you never are fully differentiated. I don't know anybody who is.
There's always that temptation, right? To get pulled one way or the other.
Yeah, totally. And I think, theory is one thing, real life is another thing. And
for real,
I try to fuse both when I talk to people, and I'm just look, you're a real person. There are some real people who are pretty differentiated, but tend to be also a little enmeshed sometimes. And there are some real people who are pretty differentiated, but they're also a little cut off. And then we've got people who, are further on each side of the spectrum. You don't ever get to perfect. It's a lifelong work. There are, of course, people who grew up in families which had pretty good enough differentiation. So if you grew up in that type of family where you were both supported, but also allowed to make your own mistakes, learn, be your own person, have your own thoughts, differentiation will come a little more easily to you. If you grew up in a family where you weren't allowed to have your own thoughts, or the adults were constantly upset or in chaos, and you felt like you had to monitor their feelings or feel their feelings, then you might have a tough time being differentiated as well. So I don't think it comes naturally. It's just, were you lucky enough to get trained to do it?
Yeah. I feel like it's tough. It reminds me a little bit of, I remember hearing Esther Perel talk at one point, and she talks about the paradox of relationships and how in order to have a great relationship, you need to meet opposing needs at the same time. And she talked about this pendulum that kind of swings back and forth between needing independence and also needing connection. But if you have too much connection, you feel smothered. And if you have too much independence, you start to feel lonely. And so you swing back and forth. But the goal is to make the swings not be super dramatic. And I feel like what we're talking about here with the kind of with differentiation is that you're not going to just ever be perfectly in the middle all the time, perfectly differentiated. You're going to swing back and forth. You're going to feel a little enmeshed sometimes. You're going to feel a little cut off sometimes and withdrawn. And the goal is to just not make those swings super extreme, because it can get kind of hairy. Can you paint some examples of what it does to a relationship when they are on either of those extremes? When you see a couple that's highly enmeshed or a couple that's more kind of disconnected and isolated, what does that look like, and what should they do in those scenarios? Yeah,
they often end up on my couch.
Yeah, with good reason.
Yeah, with good reason. I mean, when they struggle to kind of manage that pendulum swing, and that's a really beautiful visualization where you don't want it to be frantically swinging back and forth, but it's fine if it swings a little here and there. If they are a little too enmeshed and they don't really know where one person begins and the other ends, a lot of things can happen. There can be high levels of jealousy. So if the other person does take a moment to themselves or try to have an independent activity, there can be feelings that's a betrayal, right? So a very enmeshed couple might feel betrayed by things that are actually not necessarily unhealthy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Going out with your friends makes me feel betrayed because I thought we're supposed to spend every single evening together. And for you to have a self and for you to have private thoughts or feelings or experiences must mean you don't love me.
Right.
And when we think that way, we can, we erode trust. We start to feel like we're not being committed to, but it's not necessarily the reality. And so a lot of people will come in very angry and think, this person just doesn't love me enough. They don't spend all of their time with me, or they have other things that they do, and that feels like an attack on me. Enmeshed couples also end up losing their sense of self. So sometimes there's like a loss of boundaries, and we don't really know, like, what am I offering that feels good for me and what is draining me? And when that happens, sometimes people will feel really drained in the relationship, but they don't really know why. And it's because there's not a lot else going on for them. You can also, you become sometimes a lot more like explosive if you, again, don't know that line, and if you don't have the self identified anymore, because everything is like muddied all the time. You're like constantly feeling each other's feelings, and you're feeling reactive to each other's feelings. So yeah, it can cause a lot of boundary confusion, feelings of jealousy and betrayal, even if the betrayal wasn't actually there. And it causes a lot of confusing feelings.
Where do you think this belief that fusion is normal, like that having this, that when you get married, I am yours and you are mine, and we do everything together, and we feel everything together, and we think everything together, and we decide everything together, and we experience everything together. Like in some ways it's a romantic idea of like having this person complete you and becoming kind of one entity. Where do you think, obviously when taken to an extreme, it's not a great idea, but where do you think that came from, and why is it so dangerous?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about, how could we have ever decided that we're going to get in a relationship with someone and they're going to be everything? Because when you really think about it, these two people have grown however many years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 60 years without each other, and have done just fine. Mm-hmm. And then they come together, and we somehow expect all of a sudden it's only going to be me and you. And we're going to agree on everything, and we're going to feel all the same things, and it's all going to work out, even though you lived 30 years before you met me, a very different life. And so it's interesting that we think that. I definitely think it's a romantic notion that we see in the media. You see it in Disney movies, you see it in fun chick flicks and all sorts of stuff where this person comes in and they like save you. And the way that they save you is that they make life so much easier, because suddenly you feel safe and you have your partner who likes the same things as you, and you just come together and you know exactly how to live life together. And in the romantic movies, life ceases to be confusing, right? It always is like, life is so hard, I meet this person, and then we are in paradise forever. So it's a beautiful romantic notion. I think, if you look at like what Imago suggests, I don't know if you've read any of Harville Hendrix's stuff, but it's kind of like nature's attempt to get you to fall in love with that idea so that you'll meet another person to help you heal. And sometimes that goes really well because you differentiate and you support each other and you teach each other what safety is. And sometimes it doesn't go so well because you never leave that romantic stage of, imagining that it's all going to be perfect. I think in the beginning, it's actually important to think everything's perfect, because why else would you stay with another person through challenges if you didn't have a really beautiful beginning? Yeah. But it becomes problematic as time goes on to think that differences mean that there's a deep problem, because actually everybody has differences.
I love that. I love that there is so much beauty in the notion, like in the idea. It's just when taken to an unrealistic extreme that it becomes damaging, it feels like. So I want to act on behalf of a listener here. Like, let's say somebody's listening right now and they're like, oh, I might have an enmeshment issue. Like, I might have a differentiation issue here because my emotions are very much attached to my partner's emotions. Like, if they're in a bad mood, I'm in a bad mood. I do get jealous when my partner goes out maybe for a guy's night or a girl's night and doesn't bring me along. I'm starting to, some of these things that you're saying are ringing true. What do I do to kind of get a hold of myself and separate, get my I identity out of the we identity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, first, compassion for yourself. So if,
Good place to start.
yeah, I think sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with you. You're just a person who has learned to have relationships in a certain way. And clearly, if you're listening to this, you're thinking of new ways to do it. So just reminding yourself, oh, I see that I have something that's probably not helping me. A lot of people experience this. I'm just going to be able to kind of sit with that a little bit and explore, what does that mean for me? And what does that mean about your relationship? And sometimes it can help just to sit down with yourself first and say, using your example, let's say the person's like, wow, yeah, I do get really jealous when they go out with their friends once a month, and it pierces my heart. Like, I feel horrible when that happens for some reason. Get curious with yourself. Is there a reason you feel that? Sometimes maybe you're sensing it because there is a red flag. Maybe there is something that your intuition is telling you.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? Like, where is that coming from? Or you might say, I'm reality checking this right now. My partner's amazing. They come home, we hang out, we do great things together. They've had these friends forever. This is really just me starting to feel abandoned, or this is just me worrying that I'm not good enough or I'm rejected. Or this is me having to sit in these moments where they're not near me, thinking about the fact that I don't have my own things anymore. A lot of times I talk to people and I say, I think that jealousy might actually be kind of your understanding starting to come up that you actually don't have your own stuff. You're feeling like your partner's doing something to you, but actually you're noticing you've done something to yourself, which is, why aren't you going out with your friends? Why aren't you picking up a book and reading it, or walking around the house naked because it's fun that nobody else is there? What is it that is bringing all of this? So self-reflection is important. Also, like, inter-reflection. Can you sit with your partner and say, hey, let's put this out in front of us? And you can, I often think of it broken down into 5 parts. So you could sit down and you could say, hey, who am I when you're not with me? What do I like to do that you're never going to like to do? And if my husband and I were talking, I would say, he just doesn't like to read actually at all. So we're never going to have a book club together. I'm going to need to do book clubs with my friends, or read a book alone, or whatever. He is not going to read even the books I like anyway. So, and then he has his stuff, like video games. I'm never, ever going to like video games. I've never liked them before we met. I don't like them now. I don't think it's problematic that I don't like them. It doesn't mean I don't like him. That's his own thing. So can you sit with your partner and say, what is our own stuff? And how are we making time for those things? And actually, how can we sit with the fact that it's okay that I don't want to join you on that? And that it's okay that I actually don't want you to join me on it either. So reflecting on that, reflecting on what are the things I actually brought to this relationship that you do like to share with me. My husband never traveled before we met. We travel all the time now. He loves it. I never really went to concerts. I wasn't like a huge music person. We go to concerts, well, not right now, unfortunately, but we will go to concerts again at some point, all the time. So those are the things we share together. And then what did our relationship create? And what are the things we really want to protect in that culture? And so sit down and reflect with each other, where are these pieces? Because those pieces are really a symbol of differentiation, the ability to have all of those exist.
What a phenomenal conversation to have. And what a great framework. Like, as you were going through that, I was starting to think about my own relationship with my wife. And since we're at the time of recording this, we're in the middle of quarantine, like everybody's kind of locked down. We're doing the social distancing thing. And right at the very beginning, all my high school friends kind of started to group text on my buddies. And they're like, hey, let's play Dungeons and Dragons together once a week. And I've never played Dungeons and Dragons in my life. Say what?
You have never played it before?
No.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, like I'm down for trying it out. And it ended up being a great excuse for me to have like a social connection with some buddies that I don't get to see. And we've moved all over the country. And it was like, I haven't, because doesn't really matter. This doesn't matter, but things get moving so fast. It's easy to lose those connections. And since things have slowed down, it's like, oh, this is so much fun reconnecting with everybody. And I think my wife was starting to feel a little bit left out. And then yesterday she's like, hey, I'm going to go out for a girls' night. And like, we're going to do a social distancing thing, and we're going to all get in our cars and kind of like park in a parking lot and just kind of roll down our windows and talk to each other for a while. And they ended up, they took camping chairs and just kind of like set up a circle and sat in front of their cars. And she said, they were together for like 3 hours and ended up having this amazing conversation and barely scratched the surface. And I was like, yes, like it was cool to see this fluctuation for us of spending so much time together and feeling like we're each other's only real source of connection, and starting to feel a little smothered and a little like need a little bit of a breath of fresh air. And then to see the fulfillment that we got out of having our own friends and our own little hobbies and things that we could do and still be able to come back to each other and have what we have together, but also respect and cherish what we have separately. And it's like, I can see how some people, especially initially, it could be a difficult thing, but the beauty of it is when your partner comes back from being away from you, it reinforces that they're not going anywhere. It reinforces like, hey, this is my person, and they choose to be with me, not out of a sense of obligation, but more out of a sense of like that they really love me and enjoy spending time with me, even though they do have these other outside interests. And even though they do have these other outside relationships, they come back, like they gravitate back to me eventually.
Yeah. There's like deep trust in that.
Yeah.
I think that that's a huge piece. It's hard to differentiate if you don't trust. It's really hard to do that. And it's cool because I can see your face while we're talking, and you were really happy for your wife. I could tell that. Happy. Yeah. Like when you were telling this story, I could tell that it felt good for you also to see her do something that's her own thing, and that you wouldn't want to do that. You didn't want to go sit in the chairs with all of them. You wanted them to be doing that themselves.
Yeah. And it's cool when your relationship gets to a place where you experience joy by encouraging your partner to pursue things that are important to them. It's like, I haven't had that in some of my previous relationships, and now being married to my wife, it feels really good to find joy in her joy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm lucky in my marriage too, because my husband just really does find joy in seeing me do my own thing. Like that to him is something that makes him happy. So it's not a threat to him. I'm in the middle of a project right now, and he even said, like, how about you go, like, this is before the quarantine, but how about you just like go to New York City for a weekend by yourself and just work on it? Like, do you want me to find you a room, or would you like to go to the Poconos? And like really even sending me away. And again, I think if you can work with your partner on noticing that these are different areas, all of which have to be strengthened and are healthy, you can start to build that comfort with encouraging it. Once you know that it's not a bad thing for your partner to say, I really want to go fishing this weekend, it's actually a really healthy thing, then you can even be the one that offers that. Babe, I found a great fishing spot. You should go. Like, it's going to be fun for you. I'll hang back. And so I think that just breaking it down can help you to see why it's a good thing.
Yeah. Does your husband like celebrate your wins for you?
Yeah, he does. He gets really excited. Little wins, he'll do cute things, like bring home a bottle of wine or flowers or something. But I had a huge win a couple months ago, and he rented this a hotel room at a hotel that I had gone to many years ago for a bachelorette party before I knew him. But I always talk about it. It's one of those stories where he's like, yeah, babe, I've heard this story before. Like, that place is the most beautiful place. And he like surprised me with this hotel room.
That's so great.
Yeah. So he does lots of stuff like that.
I love that. I think that's such a special thing to have when you can have those separate pursuits, maybe it's a separate career or hobby or whatever. And when you like lock something in and accomplish something even small, having somebody there next to you to just be like, yeah, this is so cool. And like acknowledge your progress. And that's such a gift.
It really is. Yeah. And it's important. It's really, I think that that's the beauty of partnership, is that you have somebody else that's there kind of like loving you as you continue to live your life and like honoring your needs, instead of just thinking that you've ceased to exist as an individual and that you're only there to serve the relationship and the other person.
Oof. I'm sure you kind of touched on this earlier, but I'm sure you get some people who come in and they have completely lost themselves. How do you find yourself or rediscover yourself if you've lost yourself in your marriage or in your kids, or like you've just over the years lost touch with who you are because of the relationships that you've kind of given your identity to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a huge one. People come in and they're really angry with each other, but the thing they're really angry about is that they don't have a self anymore. And I work with a lot of people who have been married for many years, like 30, 40 years. And often they'll come in and they're really upset with each other. But what we find is it's like, we just don't have that self. And we also don't have that shared self. So there's this piece of, even when I go to the art museum, you never want to come with me. Like you haven't wanted to enjoy my stuff. We've become fully engrossed in our own careers or whatever, or we've only become engrossed in each other. And looking for the self, again, I think it really takes sitting yourself down and asking yourself, sometimes timelines can really help. Before I met this person, what did I really like to do? And when we were in the first few years of our relationship, what did I really love to do? And checking in with yourself, are these still some things that I like to do? Or have I just changed? So when I first met my husband, I loved yoga. I don't do it anymore. And actually, I had to do this exercise during this quarantine. I've had some moments where I'm like, have I lost myself a little bit? Like where did I go after we had a baby and after, we've moved into this house? But I actually discovered I don't like yoga. And
that was totally an unexpected twist for me.
Yeah, but I wanted to add it because I think sometimes people are like, well, I used to love it and now I don't do it. It must be because the relationship did it to me. But sometimes you might find the things I did 10 years ago, I actually don't want to be with those friends anymore. I don't want to be with yoga anymore. I don't want to, whatever you were doing. And if that's the case, then that's where you have to take yourself on some sort of adventure. Like you're going to need to sign up for a class, start practicing something new, read a new book, and really tap into what is going to make me feel kind of electrified again as a person, and what is going to be an interest or a fun activity or an intellectual pursuit that is all mine. And so the reason I bring up that you might not like the thing anymore is because I don't want you to feel stuck. If you're thinking, well, I used to paint, but now when I go to paint, I don't like it. Well, maybe you don't like painting anymore. That's okay. But you really are going to have to like lean into some sort of new self.
It's a good place to start, is going back to what you used to like, and then use that as a place to pivot from, kind of. Mm-hmm. I like that. Well, can we talk about the other side of the equation? Because we've talked a lot about the enmeshment side, but what about the side where you mentioned it just a moment ago, like we both become completely engrossed in our careers and there's no us, or, we've created a distance. There's a lack of connection. There's a lack of we-ness. And we're like two separate individuals living in the same space, but not really connected in any way. How do you kind of deal with a scenario on that side of the pendulum?
Yeah. How do you turn it back on in the relationship when it's been turned off? And research shows that that's actually far more detrimental than the enmeshment side, because not that enmeshment is healthy, but you've at least got energy, right? If I get an enmeshed couple in my office, they have energy, like they are willing to fight, or they are willing to They're willing to hang out together, obviously. They're really still energized. The other side is, and in Gottman's research, this shows up a lot, people have turned away from each other. And when people turn away from each other, there's no energy. And if you think about it in science terms, if there's no energy, well, then things just flatline.
Yeah.
And so it is really challenging when things get disconnected in that way. And if you think about it in terms of, what happens when I get totally engrossed in my career and you get totally engrossed in your hobby or the kids or building a new house or whatever it is, and I'm no longer there, is we actually start to build a wall between us. And the wall is between us and our backs are towards the wall, and we are putting all of our energy out into the world. And really, you want the wall to be built around you as a couple with a lot of really wonderful doorways and windows and all sorts of stuff so that you can flow energy in and out. But when that wall is between you, how are you supposed to touch? There's a brick wall that is in between the two of you, and you're not going to be able to reach each other. And so something that's really important is, number one, to build awareness that that's happening and to own it. And then to take responsibility for your own parts in that. And this is actually where people are most likely to have affairs. So, if you notice yourself getting really engrossed in everything outside of your relationship, it's really important because it's pretty dangerous to the relationship to get reconnected. But what is your own responsibility here? Anytime my husband and I start getting distant, I can say, I'm a little bit of a workaholic sometimes. And I have to own that. I have to say, honey, I think I have not been paying enough attention to you because I've been doing podcasts or working on my business or putting out content or whatever it is. And, he's very creative. So he can get really engrossed in writing music and all sorts of stuff. And it can actually take a lot of time. So he needs to take responsibility and say, I haven't given you enough time. That ability to take responsibility is the first removal of the brick, right? Okay, good. We both are safe here because we both know that we've done something. Other forms of it are, sharing too much information. So coming to your partner and saying, I've talked way too much crap on you to my mom recently, and I need to own that because that's really put a wall between you and I. Or I have taken way too much advice from my buddies about what's going on in our relationship, and I need to own that, and I need to bring the energy back. So yeah, responsibility, number one. Number two is, what can you do to start getting energy? So you have to get your jumper cables out, and you're going to have to do things that feel inorganic. And I'm sure you hear this from people. It's like the number one response to that is, I don't want it to feel inorganic. I want it to be natural. And I'm like, look, there's nothing
forced or weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, naturally, the two of you moved apart. So very unnaturally, we're going to have to move you back together and really rip down the brick wall. And once it's gone, maybe there can be some natural chemistry again. That's the hope. But you're going to have to schedule in time together. You're going to have to think of some goofy play dates that you do together, rent hotel rooms, like whatever it is that brings in that energy again. And it's going to be done by a jumper cable. It's not just going to happen naturally.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like there is a huge resistance to things like scheduling sex or scheduling dates or following like a template when you talk about your feelings and like using specific scripts for your dialogue to connect. And like it can be uncomfortable. But the idea that one of the things I tell people is like everything when you're doing it, everything that you do for the first time feels weird the first time you do it. Like if you're learning a new sport, like if I went out and started joined a rowing team, sitting in that boat with the oars in my hand would probably feel really weird for a while. But the goal is to do it enough that it becomes second nature to you. Like I remember when I first started driving, being terrified of driving our family minivan as like this 16-year-old kid, pulling out into like our neighborhood and driving from the church parking lot that we were driving circles in and driving home. I was like cold sweats. I was too touchy on the brake and I didn't know where the blinker was and I was frazzled. But then like after driving and spending a couple hours behind the wheel, it started to feel second nature. And now I do it without even thinking about it, you know? But we don't want to buy into this belief that we have to go through that discomfort in our relationships. It should just feel natural. It should just feel comfortable. It should just happen like spontaneously and perfectly. And that's just not the case, especially when you're learning any new skill. So like in order to, I like this idea that you have of like a jumpstarting the relationship, because I think it requires more energy to create momentum than it does to sustain it. And if your relationship has come to a dead standstill and you're trying to move a giant boulder, like it takes a lot of effort. But once you get that boulder moving, whether it's through some planning or, you know, some going through some things that are uncomfortable, you get a little momentum. It's really easy to build that momentum because inertia is working with you instead of against you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love what you're saying here. Like find a way to generate some momentum, lean into the discomfort, take some responsibility, and see if you can't get that spark rekindled again.
Yeah. Have fun. You have to have fun with each other or the spark is not going to come back.
Totally. I love that. What do you guys typically do for fun? Like when you said, when you're falling into that, like maybe I'm being a little bit more of a workaholic or I'm getting lost in my music. Like, what do you guys do for fun to reconnect?
My husband is so fun. I think I'm fun, but he's like really, really fun. So he plans things probably weekly that are fun. And like I told you before we hopped on that we were searching for dinosaur eggs this morning. So he ordered all of these cool dinosaur eggs online that you actually have to like excavate. And he went and hid them in the woods, and we went and found them with our son. So he really thinks of like outdoor adventures.
Yeah. How old is your son?
2.5.
I'll bet he was thrilled to find dinosaur eggs.
Very disappointed because there wasn't a pteranodon egg.
Oh,
I know.
Dang it. Maybe next time.
There's supposed to be one, and we have 5 left, so we'll try again.
I'll have my fingers crossed for the pteranodon.
Yes, we need a pteranodon. So, but we think of lots of fun things. We think of small things. So we have rituals, and this is something I talk to people a lot about, which I think is probably important for your listeners.
Yes, rituals.
It's so important to have reliability in a relationship, and one of the biggest ways that you can build reliability is with rituals. And so there are going to be random fun moments like buying dinosaur eggs and finding them in the woods, but there also need to be things that you tap into that are predictable. And a really good book for this is called The Intentional Family. Have you ever read that book? It's really good. It's about really what it looks like to build rituals and how a lot of them are not organic, but you forget that 10 years in. You think that they were organic. But for my husband and I, like every Friday, we have a wine night and we drink a glass of wine and we play chess. And it's like our fancy night. And we do this every Friday, probably without fail, unless something really crazy is going on.
I love that.
And he brings the Bluetooth speaker down and we listen to new music, and most of it is just talking, but we play chess. So that's a weekly ritual. We also just do fun things like pick new shows to watch, go for a walk. We really find a lot of joy together, and this is in the S section of that 5-part breakdown. We find so much joy in finding fun things for our son. So we love to play with him. We love to like hide dinosaur eggs or make up fake adventures. He dressed up like the Easter Bunny, and we made this whole Easter Bunny, experience for our son. So we have these weekly rituals. We have rituals that are, yearly. So the ways that we celebrate holidays is really fun. We travel. And if you're listening, I think that it's a really good exercise just to think, what is it that we rely on and we know it's going to happen almost without fail?
I love that. Those rituals, excuse me, those rituals really are important. I think of the things that bring us joy. Like every Wednesday night we watch Survivor when it's on. So last night we were on the couch, like screaming at the TV because they're in the middle of season 40 right now. It's an intense season.
I can't believe it's still on.
Everybody says that. It's amazing though. This season they've got all winners. It's like the only people who are playing are people who have won past seasons. So it's pretty high level competition. It's a lot of fun to watch. I started reading to my wife every night out loud. Like we crawl into bed and we read fantasy books, and it's like this is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. So I'm glad you brought it up. Dr. Gottman says it's the little things done often that make the difference. And right now, everybody who's in a relationship is doing little things that create their relationship.
Yeah.
And you're either doing them without thinking about it and without being intentional, or you're doing it intentionally. And the relationship you have is a result of the choices that you've made and the rituals that you've kind of created. So like everybody brushes their teeth, every night before they go to bed, or you take a shower, you have your normal grooming routines and you do them without thinking about it. And there's other things that you do in your life with your partner without even thinking about it. Like maybe you just crawl into bed and roll on your side and go to sleep without cuddling. Like that is a ritual. Mm-hmm. It's a habit. It's a thing that you do. And I love hearing about things that people like you and your husband do that you do on purpose. And I feel like the more on purpose we are with our rituals, the more control we have over the type of relationship that we get to create together. And it's worth sitting down and thinking about, like, how intentional am I about how I connect throughout the day, and how many things am I doing just because I'm on autopilot,
Yeah. And I actually think you bring up this also beautiful opportunity to sit down and think about the unintentional things you do and start to make those intentional.
Yeah.
Because noticing all of the things you do, even while you were talking, I was like, wow, there are a lot of things actually that my husband and I do that we don't even think about. I turn on the coffee pot for him. I just don't even think, but that's really important because I'm turning towards him. I'm giving him energy. So sitting down and thinking, we know there's some obvious things like wine night or reading fantasy books together in bed, but we also do a lot of other beautiful things. And can we notice those? Can we notice the goodnight kiss, or the fact that every morning when you wake up, you make sure you tiptoe away so that your partner can stay asleep because you love them and you want them to rest. But come up with a list of all of the beautiful things you do to connect with each other.
I love that. And be grateful for them and use them to validate how amazing your life and your relationship is together. Mm-hmm. Love that. I really appreciate you. This has been a really fun conversation. I feel like there's so much. I'm going to go back and re-listen to this probably a couple of times and take notes, just because there's so much to digest here. So I know you've just delivered a lot to my audience, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to chat with me. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was so fun to talk. I wasn't even looking at the clock. I could have just kept going and going.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Before we log off, I would love, and I want you to stay on after we end our conversation just for a second here, but where can people find you, or what would you like them to check out? I want to give you a chance to plug yourself.
Sure. So my name is Liz Earnshaw. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I own a practice called A Better Life Therapy, where we focus on relationships, whether you're single or in a relationship. And we serve people in California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So you can check us out on abetterlifetherapy.com. We also have workshops that we do worldwide. So even if you're not in one of those states, check us out. And I'm also on Instagram, where I share tons of tips about relationships. And I try to make them
Cool. And I will link to those in the blog post for this episode so that people can find them easily. Thank you, Liz. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
If you just walked up to a stranger in the street right now and said, hey, what do I need to do to make sure that my relationship withstands the test of time, that I have an amazing, amazing relationship? I guarantee you, one of the first things they would say is go on dates together. Everybody knows it. You got to go on dates if you want to have an extraordinary relationship. But if you're like most people, your dating life might have taken a bit of a hit lately. Maybe you're not going on as many dates as you were when you first met, or maybe the dates that you are going on are a little bit boring. Maybe you feel like you're stuck in a bit of a rut and you're just kind of doing the same old thing over and over again. If that's the case, I have a gift for you. If you go to getfreedates.com, I am going to send you 5 free dates. Once a week, you're going to get a date for the next 5 weeks, and that date is going to include a game plan. I'm going to send you amazing activities. I'm going to send you links to products and games that you can play together. I'm going to send you treats that you can make together or that you can buy and enjoy that you probably haven't ever had before. I'm going to send you conversation starters that are questions or topics of conversation. They're going to make sure that this date is a connecting experience, that you laugh, that you have fun, and that you feel more connected by the end of the date than you did when you began. That is what dating is all about. It's not about the boring routine. It's about implementing some novelty, some surprise, some excitement, and getting to know your partner on a much deeper level. And I am going to send you 5 of those dates. All you have to do is go to getfreedates.com, type in your name and email address, and I'll send you 1 date every week for 5 weeks. I want you to have an amazing relationship, and I want you to continue to date each other, and this is my way of helping you out. So just go to getfreedates.com and sign up.